we are in a very extreme scenario where we have one country attacking all other, or like basically attacking Ukraine, and then a lot of countries of the West actually supporting Ukraine. So we are already in a very difficult situation. We have sanctioned Russia in all possible ways. So it's clear we are in an exceptional state, and even in this exceptional state, we wouldn't be seizing these assets, but just using them basically to rebuild Ukraine, and then allow the country, if the war ends, to potentially get their claim back, even though we want to put that claim then to Ukraine as a reparation. So it is a bit of a complex construct, but I think it could work.
Now, let's talk about those frozen Russian assets, because talks are now going on in the European Union about whether to use and seize those Russian assets to support Ukraine in the war. The combined assets represent more than 150 billion euros, and they could be used to buy arms. The Kremlin says that such an action would constitute theft and have threatened retaliation. Now, Damian Boeselager is the German MEP, Vice Chair of the European Parliament's Committee on Economics and Monetary Affairs. Welcome to you, Damian.
Thanks for the invite.
You're very welcome. Tell us, is the European Union going to seize these Russian assets?
So this has been a question that we have been asking ourselves for quite some time, because as you might know, the deficit that Ukraine faces on a yearly basis is around 40 billion euros, which so far has been covered half-half by Europe, including the UK and the US on the other side. And so since the US is trying to cut back a bit, the question is how can we make sure that Ukraine can sustain itself, but also buy the necessary weapons? And these sovereign assets are a question that we have been discussing, because we already are using the interest rates on these assets to support Ukraine. And now the idea is to not actually seize these assets, but to take them and transfer them to, or like basically take them as a security and transfer the full amount to Ukraine. And then whenever Russia would actually be getting these assets back, if they're unfrozen, that European countries would then stand up for it.
Okay, that's a really useful explanation of the conversation. Would it be lawful? Russia is saying it is not lawful, as one might expect. They said they would go to court to fight that. Are you confident it would meet the requirements of the law?
I mean, it is a question of international law. And since the European countries are basically saying, look, we just use this as security and we will transfer it over to Ukraine, but in the end it still belongs to Russia technically, but we will make sure that it's then counted against the reparations that Russia would have to pay in any future deal. It is a bit difficult to say where this stands legally. And again, with international law, it is a bit of a question of what the countries and the states agree with each other.
Right, so taking them and using it as a guarantee for a loan, which ultimately, as it were on paper, the European Union would still answer for, that might be a way around the question of seizure. But we shall see. It'll be challenged, no doubt, as and when it happens. And at the same time, it hasn't happened, and you've got countries, including Hungary and Slovakia, which are known to be sympathetic to the Russian leader. Do they have a power to veto this?
Yes, there's a big discussion also about this. I actually do not have the answer. There's not only the question of if they can veto it now, but also since the freezing of the assets every year needs their support, what would happen if in a year from now they would decide that we don't want to continue freezing these assets, which would then mean that Russia would need to get immediate access if there's no other deal made. And then the countries would basically need to pay this immediately to Russia, or at least to basically the Russian central bank who owns these assets.
Right. And the next point, it's more than a technicality. It's about the use of the money, because Ukraine is really in need of help finding, procuring weapons and ammunition for the war against Russia, but it still is in dire need as a country. It's still trying to run itself as a nation state, and it's short of money to do that.
Yes, as I said, I mean, the overall budget of Ukraine is around 80 billion euros at this point, and half of it can be covered with the taxes that Ukrainians pay or Ukrainian businesses pay, and the other half has been, since the full-scale invasion, covered by all of us. And so I think what is clear is that we also never gave so much that they could actually buy a lot of weapons to maybe also massively shift the front lines in their favor. So I always felt a bit, as a budgetarian who has been working on the Ukraine facility, that this is not sufficient and that we could do much more. And that's why I'm kind of excited about this proposal, even though I'm a bit cautious about, as you said, the legality.
Okay, there's the legalities, and there's also the possibility that taking and using these Russian funds in this way might just deter other foreign investors from coming to these same banks and investing their reserves.
It's true, but on the other side, we are in a very extreme scenario where we have one country attacking all other, or like basically attacking Ukraine, and and then a lot of countries of the West actually supporting Ukraine. So we are already in a very difficult situation. We have sanctioned Russia in all possible ways. So it's clear we are in an exceptional state, and even in this exceptional state, we wouldn't be seizing these assets, but just using them basically to rebuild Ukraine, and then allow the country, if the war ends, to potentially get their claim back, even though we want to put that claim then to Ukraine as a reparation. So it is a bit of a complex construct, but I think it could work.
Well, it is a complex construct, and we're grateful to you, Damian Boeselager, German MEP, Vice Chair of the European Parliament's Committee on Economics and Monetary Affairs, for giving us your perspective on these questions. Now, America.
And I'm waiting very much European Commission proposal for using Russian immobilized assets for aid to Ukraine. We have been asking for quite a long time to use those immobilized assets for Ukraine, but now Commission has a proposal, and we really need to see what's in details.
Of course, there are some legal questions that has to be asked, and I'm confident that we will find a way through this. But the whole idea of using the frozen assets, I think, is a good idea. I hope that everybody recognizes now that there is a hybrid war. And one day it's Poland, the other day it's Denmark, and next week it will probably somewhere else that we see sabotage, or we see drones flying, or we see, you can. There are many different kind of episodes. So I see this from a European perspective. There is only one country that are willing to threat us, and it is Russia, and therefore we need a very strong answer back.
This is Russia testing Europe, and Europe's answer must be to ramp up different capabilities, air defense, drones, and so on, by joint funding and joint procurement. Second one is that Russia's provocations and this kind of engagement won't weaken our support to Ukraine. Ukraine needs more in weaponry, assistance, and money, and also we should use Russian frozen assets as much as possible for that.